Assassin's Creed Rogue is considered to be the most underrated Assassin's Creed game by most of the AC fanbase. And I can see why, as it was completely overshadowed by the release and controversy of Assassin's Creed Unity over 10 years ago. It was also the last AC game to come out during the Xbox 360 and PS3 era, as Ubisoft moved on to the PS4 and Xbox One. Out of all the hate that Unity got, this game got a lot of love in particular. Is it because we get to play as a Templar for the first time around? Is it because people were so disappointed by Unity's launch that they were fine with playing any other game besides that game? I'm not exactly sure why. I mean, sure, I liked it when I played it the first time around, but I really wanted to see if Assassin's Creed Rogue still holds up today 10 years later, and whether everyone is actually correct about this game being an underrated masterpiece. So sit back, relax and enjoy this video, as we will be revisiting Assassin's Creed Rogue today. Also, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. Before getting into this, I do want to warn you that this video will contain spoilers of the game, so without further ado, let's jump right into this. Assassin's Creed Rogue starts with the narration of our protagonist, Shay Patrick Cormac, with this cool-ass shot of an eagle overlooking the North Atlantic, the open world that you would be exploring for the bulk of the game. Now, Shay for the most part is a decent protagonist, except for when he does the same cringe and emo one-liner throughout the game.
I make my own luck, Liam. I make my own luck, Liam. I make my own luck. I make my own luck. I make my own luck. I make my own luck.
How many times do I have to tell you, Liam? I make my own luck.
Anyway, we are introduced to the assassins of this game. First and foremost, we have Liam, who's a close friend and companion of Shay. I like Liam and his friendship with Shay, and the banter they have back and forth while exploring the world during the prologue. Then we have Chevalier, who's rude and mean to Shay for no reason, which is one thing I want to touch upon. Why the assassins besides Liam just mean to Shay for no apparent reason whatsoever? If this was done on purpose to ultimately make us side with the Templars later on, then it's a very lazy attempt at doing so, as the nuances between both the sides of the series was something that a longtime fans like me were super interested in, and Rogue would have been a pretty good game at exploring those nuances. We are also introduced to our ship, the Morrigan, in this tutorial and also the naval gameplay. Now I'm not going to talk much about the naval gameplay of Rogue in general, as it more or less works similarly to Black Flag, which I already did a video on where I share my full thoughts on it, so make sure to check it out after finishing this one. The only changes that we do have in the naval system in Rogue is that instead of a swivel gun from Black Flag, we have the pickle gun. The puckle gun. We also no longer have the useless chain shot at the front of the ship, as it is replaced by the cannonades. Now the pickle gun, I said it again, didn't I? Well, I love pickles, so. The puckle gun is a really effective gun, and I would say it does some hefty damage. However, my criticism with this gun is that it is a bit too OP, as I can literally just use the puckle gun to damage several ships. The thing with the swivel gun was that at least there was a buffer between your attacks, but you can fire plenty of rounds before recharging, which does reduce the incentive to play around with the other weapons at your disposal. I feel like it would have been better if you nerfed the gun slightly and you could only fire a certain amount of rounds, not too many, like around 5 before taking a few more seconds to recharge, so we can play around more with the weapons of the Morrigan. Talking about the Morrigan, I actually liked it way more than the Jackdaw from AC4 and the Aquila from AC3. As it is a lot more maneuverable and moves quickly, thus making it pretty efficient. The burning oil is also another effective addition to your arsenal that can be used to damage ships from the rear, and it's a lot more useful than the fire barrels from AC4. Anyway, we are done with the naval tutorial section of this game. Next up, we have a small training mission introducing us to the gameplay mechanics of this game. Now I won't really be talking much about this either, as the gameplay works pretty similar to AC3 and AC4, as it is pretty much on the same engine as those games with reused assets. So you can check out my video on both those games if you want more of my in-depth thoughts on the gameplay of these games. I do like that we get to see the Davenport homestead for a bit in this game. It just makes me feel very nostalgic to see it again, as it is my favorite location from AC3. And it is nice to see Achilles and Adivale again, even though they don't really feel like themselves at all in this game. That's really it for the tutorial portion of this game. One thing I like about Rogue is that it doesn't waste too much time in introducing you to the open world and its activities. Now the side activities in Rogue for the most part are pretty similar to Black Flag, so I won't really be talking too much about those either. But I would say that doing them does get pretty boring, as you already know what to expect, as most of them just feel copy-pasted from Black Flag. Even the naval boarding minigame felt like a chore to do in Rogue, as I already did so much of it in Black Flag and I even got bored of it by the end of the game. Like, I didn't even bother to get off the ship to kill the enemy crew members. I just used the puckle gun to take them all out. Or I just ram the ship and loot all the remaining cargo that they have. The only interesting twist that I liked in this minigame, however, is that now enemies can board your ship as well by ramming into you, and you can lose quite a few crew members. I like that, as it adds an extra layer of challenge, as we now have to make sure that our ship doesn't get rammed and boarded. Overall though, my thoughts on the naval in Rogue is that it feels pretty pointless if I'm being blunt. Like, it just feels unnecessary and makes no sense as to why would Shay go around looting ships and other places in the open world. In the context of Black Flag, it made sense to do these things in the open world as you are a pirate. But in Rogue, there's a clear disconnect between the open world side content and the narrative context of doing them. I feel like Rogue would have benefited for a much more linear and focused game without the naval, especially since a lot of the naval gameplay works similarly to Black Flag with very minimal changes, which made me feel very bored of doing the naval stuff in this game. It would have been better if they just gave us some small self-contained privateering side missions like the ones in AC3, if they wanted to incorporate the naval into the game. Talking about the open world in Rogue, it is quite bland to say the least. Don't get me wrong, I do think there's some pretty places in the North Atlantic, but there's nothing really setting the open world apart from the other games in the series. The only reason the River Valley is somewhat interesting to explore is that it produces a nice challenge for us to maneuver the narrow and tight straits, and the Morrigan is also a perfect ship for that, as it feels a lot lighter and easy to maneuver compared to the Jackdaw or the Aquila from AC3 and 4. The cities in AC Rogue are also quite lackluster and boring as well. They just look like reskinned versions of these cities from Assassin's Creed 3. I guess it makes sense since both these games are set in America. But yeah, not a lot of the areas you explore in Rogue feel all that memorable, especially compared to Black Flag. I do like some spots in the North Atlantic, and I like the challenge of maneuvering the tight straits of the River Valley, but other than that, the overall open world in Rogue just feels very bland. Getting back to the main story, we find the location of the precursor temple and head for Lisbon. This entire Lisbon section is actually pretty fun to play through. I like the mini parkour puzzle that you do in the church. It reminds you of the assassin tombs from the Ezio games. It would have been even better if the puzzles were timed like the Ezio games to add more challenge to it, as it is quite easy to the fact that it probably can't even be called a puzzle. Anyway, upon interacting with the Tree of Eden or whatever it is called, a massive earthquake is triggered. I really like the set piece which follows, as it really captures the intensity and devastation of the earthquake which actually hit Lisbon in 1755. I wish we got more small self-contained missions like this in Assassin's Creed where you transport it to a completely new area, as we don't really get that anymore. Then we have the confrontation scene between Shay and Achilles, and I would say that this scene is pretty well acted, but in terms of the actual plot, it makes no sense. How would the assassins know this would happen? And on top of that, why do the assassins actively want the piece of Eden anyway? The only justifiable reason would be to keep it from getting into the wrong hands of the Templars, but then the better idea would have been to just leave it there. So I guess Shay does have a point, huh? I just don't like the way the assassins are portrayed in this game at all. Their actions and their beliefs pretty much contradict what we know of them from the games prior. It just doesn't make any sense why they would do the things that they do in this game. But that pretty much concludes the whole prologue of this game. I could talk about the modern day now, but to be honest, I don't fucking care. It's pointless and adds nothing to the overarching storyline of Assassin's Creed. The only thing that I would say is that she's a bitch. Getting back to Shay's storyline, Shay is rescued by a random couple whose son happens to work for the Templars. I also want to ask, how the hell did they manage to rescue Shay? He was literally in the butt middle of nowhere and he would have probably died from hypothermia judging by how cold it gets up there. But I choose to overlook this detail as it's just a video game, but it's still a valid question. We are introduced to the city of New York and also criminals. Yeah, I don't know why they call them that since these people basically work for the assassins. And if they do, then why are they vandalizing and hurting innocent people? Doesn't it go against one of the core tenets of the Brotherhood? This game's story just continues to baffle me. Anyway, here we are introduced to a brand new side activity that is introduced in AC Rogue, which has probably never been in a Ubisoft game before. These are the gang headquarters. Jokes aside, I actually think that these are the best piece of side content in this game. This is primarily because of the addition of enemy stalkers lurking in the area, which you have to be wary of, as now you are the one who's being hunted. So you have to pay attention to your surroundings and the noises. It also gives an actual incentive to use eagle vision to locate these stalkers, which is something that the previous games didn't really utilize that well. It really adds a new level of fun and challenge to the game, as no longer you just have to take out enemies using stealth, but also be wary of enemies doing it to you. You can also face them outside the gang headquarters in the open world, so you need to be on your guard as they can come out and attack you from anywhere. I really like this twist in the gameplay loop, as now you are the one being hunted, and these assassins do quite a bit of damage in one strike. I mean, they can take out half your health. Also, the gang leaders in these headquarters can swat you in an instant and run, so you have to avoid being seen by them. They're also pretty strong and can do loads of damage. I like that this game made the assassins formidable threats to face rather than the regular enemy NPCs that you face. It really makes them distinct and separate from the enemies that you faced before. By taking over gang headquarters, you liberate the area from criminals and you get increased revenue. The revenue can also be increased by doing renovations across the world and getting the money earned from these establishments. It's quite similar to the Ezio game's revenue system, and I quite like it, as we're taking charge and giving back control to the Templars. Another piece of side content which I like doing were the shipwrecks. These are completely new, and I really like the way they're designed with parkour navigation in mind, and the views you get from synchronizing atop these viewpoints are simply breathtaking. Lastly, I like the assassin interceptions, which are basically the complete opposite of the assassination contracts, where you're supposed to find and kill all the assassins trying to assassinate their targets. It's fun and does become a bit more challenging, especially if you have enemy stalkers around the area. It's a nice little twist from the usual assassin contracts, and I also really like the pigeon catching mini game in the beginning, as it adds a bit more challenge to this side content. Other than that, there is not much of note to talk about in terms of side content in AC Rogue. There are the sea shanties and a bunch of collectibles you can find, and finding those you can unlock a new armor just like every other AC game. One thing that I like about the gameplay of Rogue is that the game doesn't penalize you for killing innocent civilians like the other games. However, if you kill more of them, then it will attract the attention of powerful bounty hunters who are really difficult to fight, so your best course is to run away and avoid them completely. It's pretty much the notoriety system from AC3, where a higher notoriety level would spawn harder enemies. You can face them in combat for a good challenge or run away, which actually gives more incentive to do combat in this game just for the challenge, just like in AC3. It's strange why a system like this was implemented in a game where you're literally playing as a Templar, yet no other Assassin's Creed game besides 3 does this. I mean, I would say that this system would have been way more suitable in Black Flag. I don't know why they didn't implement it there. Anyway, focusing back on the main story, we meet Colonel Monroe, who's super boring and uninteresting, just like most of the Templars in this game. It's crazy that in a game where you play as a Templar, the Templars end up being the least compelling characters. I mean, I'm supposed to be rooting for these guys here, but all of these characters just feel very one-note and one-dimensional. Anyway, we find out that the assassins are gathering poisonous weapons and intend to use it on the civilians. I mean, what? Seriously, why are the assassins straight up evil in this game, and why are the Templars all of a sudden the good guys? It makes no sense and really just kills all the nuance and depth which made these games pretty interesting to me in the first place. You unlock the grenade launcher here, which can be used to throw shrapnel grenades to blow up enemies, berserk grenades to turn multiple enemies berserk, and the sleep grenades to put multiple guards to sleep. As much as I like this inclusion, I do think that it breaks the challenge of stealth, since I can pretty much put every guard in the area to sleep in 2 to 3 shots, especially if you already have the air rifle to shoot the berserk and sleep darts. There's also the firecracker darts which can be used to distract guards, but I didn't really use them as much, especially considering that the whistle alone can do this task. Then, as we are busy dismantling the power structures of the assassins, Colonel Monroe dies, which honestly made me feel nothing. I know this was supposed to be an emotional moment of the game, but we barely knew the guy for like one sequence, and even his character itself was nothing much to write home about. Also, Shay makes the dumbest decision by giving the manuscript to him. Now the assassins have it. Great. So Shay joins the Templars and finally Hatham enters the story. However, he doesn't feel like himself at all in this game for some reason until the very end. Like, where did the cold and ruthless Templar that we knew and loved from AC3 go? Anyway, then the rest of the game is pretty much a wild goose chase to find the manuscript and hunting down the assassins. I honestly felt nothing for the assassins that Shay kills in this game. There are no nuance and deep conversations between the two sides like we got from AC1. Hell, even AC3 did these a whole lot better. Every assassin in this game is just so poorly written and they just act like generic bad guys, and it's such a shame that since this game could have been really much more interesting if it tackled the moral dilemmas that both these sides face, if it actually explored the Templar and assassin philosophy deeply. Yet it just ends up being an extremely shallow and dumbed down narrative just to appeal to the masses. Either way, talking about the ending of this game, I like this final showdown. The location of this final mission looks absolutely beautiful, and I also really like the final set piece with the crumbling precursor temple. I did genuinely feel sad for killing Liam. He was probably the only assassin in this game that felt somewhat human, and I did like his friendship with Shay. It's a shame that they had to part ways under such circumstances. And also, Hatham gets his old personality back. We also now know how Achilles became a crippled and depressed old man in AC3. Although, I would like to ask, how the fuck did he manage to get himself back to the homestead? I mean, he seemingly is in the middle of nowhere under extremely cold conditions, and now he's also crippled. Like, how did he survive, let alone find his way back? I don't know, maybe I'm just looking too deep into things, but it is still a valid question. The one thing that I do like about this ending is that how it ties into Assassin's Creed Unity. And man, it only makes me wish we got a sequel game with Arno or Connor, where Shay is the main villain. I mean, this ending was a perfect setup for a sequel game. But of course, since Ubisoft doesn't like making sequels for beloved characters, they just never went anywhere with it. Assassin's Creed Rogue is a strange game to me. I really liked it when I played it the first time around. Maybe back then I was too young and naive to see the flaws with this game. Replaying this game just felt like a chore to me as opposed to being fun. Now I know there are a lot of people who absolutely love this game and are probably getting ready to attack me in the comments below for my opinion, but I just found this game very average on a replay. The biggest problem with Assassin's Creed Rogue in my opinion is that it struggles to find an identity of its own in the series. Its open world, side activities and even the narrative just feel very uninspired and lackluster for the most part. However, I would say that there is a certain nostalgia that I have with this game, considering that's the very first game that I did a Let's Play series on in this channel, and it's pretty much the first set of videos that I ever made for this channel, so I do sort of have some fond memories with this game. And I also can't help but find the main theme of this game very catchy for some reason. In fact, I used to sing it every time when I used to boot up the main menu. This game also gives me major Christmas vibes for some reason, maybe because it is set in a snowy winter setting very reminiscent of Christmas, which is why I guess it's fitting to make this video around this time of the year. But overall, Assassin's Creed Rogue to me doesn't particularly stand out as a noteworthy game in the franchise. Whilst I do appreciate that it added some subtle changes to the gameplay, but it still didn't fully engage me throughout its playtime. It still struggles to find its own footing and just ends up being a very bland and mediocre game. It's such a shame that this game had so much potential but ended up missing its mark, which is the case with most Ubisoft games. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you did. 2024 has been quite an eventful year for me, and I hope it has been one for you guys too. I can't wait to do more stuff in this channel and see where I could take it in 2025, and I hope you guys stay tuned for that. Anyway, I wish you guys a very Merry Christmas and a wonderful New Year, and I'll see you guys very soon with another video. See ya!